very interesting topic. I'll just throw some headline numbers of what's being talked about, and hence we'll know the kind of importance that each of them are going to play in the overall nation building. So we're saying that India is going to become the third largest economy by 2030-31, give or take to whom you talk. And and in terms of trade perspective, more than 90% of that trade is happening through the ports. Wow. Okay, somebody's cheering for this as well. You can cheer more as they speak. And 90% of that is happening, and that's all done through the ports. And we have a vast, seafront which is there, and the economy, for it to grow and for trade to grow, they are the greatest enabler. By themselves, they may be a small point, but without them, the trade can't happen. So that's what it is. And there is one part of it. The second is also in terms of the lot of industrialization which happens along with port and the value that gets created. So, and all of this is what we will touch upon, of how individually all of them come together. And for the ports to get built is where Tijo kind of comes in and kind of give that perspective. What does it take to build a port? So I'll start with Rajiv ji, with you. Having done 3 greenfield ports in India and many more terminals that you operate, you could probably give us from historical context as well. What's the kind of development that can happen as we were decades before, and the opportunity it happens for going forward as well. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, so Essar as a group, we started with construction on the ports in the 80s, and then moved on to shipping, and then developed a lot of ports. You talked about 3 greenfield ports. One was in Hazira, second was in Wadinar in Jamnagar, and the third one is also in Jamnagar, Salaya. So these are very, very innovative projects that we developed. Innovative when I say is that, you can today develop a port with 10,000 crore, 70,000 crore, whatever, then all kind of numbers. But to develop in a manner that, your purpose is well met and the location is so important that, so the biggest killer in a port project is dredging and breakwater. So if you can reduce or avoid these, then you are in good shape. Then you are only developing the mechanization, the jetties, the space that is required, and all of that. So I think we have moved on in the port industry from being shallow draft ports where a lot of labor was required from the days of, Haji Mastan, and a lot of the, these kind of people all across all the major ports in country moved there from that to working in a mechanized manner through the PPP projects, and moving away from just pure stevedoring to mechanized operations, deep draft. So all of those issues have been taken care. Today, Indian ports are modern ports, and they have good infrastructure in terms of mechanization, in terms of storage, connectivity. Now, I think we are focusing a lot on connectivity, multimodal connectivity of rail, roads, pipelines, so that you can avoid multiple handling, and seamless handling of cargo can take place. Deep draft ports means, larger ships can come. You can increase the capacity of a port just by increasing the draft. From a Supramax, if you start handling capes or, large modern capes, that itself will take your cargo handling to 4 times. So I think that is what everyone understands these days, whether it is in the bulk or in the liquids or in the in areas like LNG, etc. And from there now we are probably moving in another direction, which is the green direction, where we are going to focus on uh, transporting green energy through by whether it is green ammonia or hydrogen or other biofuels or SAF. So the ports will become also the manufacturing hub for green energy, because ports typically have a lot of land, and if you have these right on the port, then the transportation cost is not entailed. So I think all in all, multiple handling is a killer, because that really increases the cost for the customer. So I think that is where the customers as well as the port operators are focusing.
So you kind of touched upon from Jihastan part of it. I think yesterday I was reading about maybe about 3 decades before, the turnaround time that the ships used to have was close to about 25 days. And just now, it's less than a day. That's the kind
We
of
still
improvement.
have certain ports, which are shallow draft ports, where bulk carriers come and they are there for 20 days, Cape-size vessels, and there's waiting also. But I think as we go along, because people want multiple choice in various locations, so I think that's going to go away in maybe in next 5-10 years.
Yeah, sure. So, and just from not from the bulk part of it, but at least from the container perspective, there was this study which was done by World Bank along with S&P, where they had talked about the port efficiency, and about 10 ports in India qualify in the top 100 of how in multiple parameters of port efficiency part of it. So, long way we have come across in the last probably couple of decades. So that's what it is. And you also talked about the whole connectivity, and probably we'll come back again and really talk about it on the road rail split, and really how that can become a good enabler, even from a green perspective, how
And
much of that is needed.
pipelines.
Pipelines, of course, on the slurry, on all of that, to transportation part of it. We can do that. Now, coming to you, Mr. Mukerjee, from a terminal perspective, right, and also being part of a global chain, and how do you look at India, and what are the kind of developments which is happening, and how you think you'll be able to contribute into the overall economy and the development of port infrastructure out here?
Hello. Am I audible? Yeah, I guess so. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for the very pertinent question. So you mentioned about the World Bank study. It was very interesting that APM terminals operate 6 out of the 10, the top 10 ports that have been mentioned out there. So we have a good base of bringing in a lot of knowledge, a lot of best practices, which we can implement out here. As a container terminal operator, our biggest focus area is to ensure that we do not become the bottleneck in this large supply chain. We are just one important player in it, where we have to move the boxes in and out, both on the vessel and in and out through the gate. So there is 2 areas that we need to look at, and how do we ensure there is efficiency, which ensures that we are able to lift the standard of the trade, lift the standard of the ease of doing business to the customer. That is the key focus area. From being part of a global conglomerate and then operating a terminal in India, our basic focus has been on 4 areas. First is safety. We actually operate a very, very intense operation at the terminal. And safety is our license to operate, license to exist. And that safety does not only limit to the people who are working at the terminals, but in a gateway terminal like ourselves in gateway terminals of India, we have more than 2,000 to 3,000 trucks which are coming in and out every day. So a lot of external people who are visiting the terminal. How do we ensure safety for all? And that is where best practices keep in, and I can assure you that the standards have definitely seen a significant rise. Moving beyond that, then it comes to the quintessential triangle that we talk about, right, where we say system. So there is a lot of best practice sharing. We try to modernize the infrastructure from a tech perspective to come to the standard that is being used in other global facilities, and also implement that in India, which is driving efficiency. Second, from the process. As APM terminals, we are extremely focused on process. We follow the Toyota system to a large extent, where we are actually defining each and every step in the process that happens, identifying waste. And to us, waste is anything that is not adding value to the end customer. And how can we look at removing that waste? And finally, by doing both of these, lifting the people, right? We are a community business. We employ directly and indirectly more than 2,000 people in our terminal facility. Majority of them come from the community in and around where the port is located. We work a lot in terms of improving their awareness, improving the knowledge. When I spoke about the Toyota way of working, one of the important things is provide the power to the frontliner. And the frontliner is the crane operator. We all sitting in nice offices actually cannot solve a problem as well as a crane operator can. But today they don't have the tools. So we focus on training them on problem solving tools so that they can identify the waste and call out the waste and come up with solutions. And our jobs are very easy. It is about enabling them to implement that solution. So these are some of the best practices that come in as being part of a global organization, which also allows us then to operate one of the most efficient terminals in the country and thereby help trade.
No, absolutely. And also, um, it could be the reverse aspect as well, right? That India having aspirations to go beyond Indian shores and have terminals, ports getting operated outside of India. So many of this best practices then gets dovetailed from a port ecosystem perspective to go outside of India. So thanks for that. Coming on to you, Tijo. From a construction perspective, on the ports, it's a very complex, part of it, which is there. From a value perspective, you could probably say between, leave the dredging part of it, but it could be some between 5,000 to 7,000 crore, depending upon how much of, terminals that you're building. But otherwise, how has this whole technology which has gone changed? And today, what is it that customers are looking at in terms from a construction and the technology part of it? Has there been a kind of a reduction in timelines also from a port execution perspective? People want it here and now. So how have things changed in the last probably couple of decades?
Yeah, good afternoon all. Thank you ETInfra for giving us a platform to represent the contractors. So as we have been hearing from the morning, like for the shipping lines to operate and to generate revenue, to bring down the logistics cost, what is important is to create the best infrastructure. So this infrastructure is what is going to improve the efficiency of the system. Thereby we can bring down the cycle time. And now, conventionally, if you look at most of the ports in India are having an average depth of, say, 14 to 15 meters. I won't say average depth, maybe even less, it may be 12 meters. So we are not able to bring bigger ships. So we need to depend on transshipment ports in and around India. Even though Vizhinjam now we started operating a terminal, but we have a long way to go to improve the overall efficiency of the system. And that is where I feel companies like L&T can help in developing and constructing ports which can accommodate mother vessels and bigger vessels. And coming to that, already government has started investing, making major investments, like Vadhavan port is a major infrastructure project which almost 76,000 crores investment, where a deep draft port is getting ready without disturbing any of the operating ports. It is a totally greenfield port with minimal development onshore. So a new island is created, say some 2 kilometers into the sea, and it is protected by a 10 kilometers of breakwater, and the entire setup is connected by approach bridges. This is something which has minimal impact on the shoreline, and it can help us creating large volumes of transportation. Now, when it comes to construction technology and engineering capability, to construct such kind of ports, we need to construct breakwaters. Like Mr. Agarwal was mentioning, breakwater and dredging is something, is a killer for the investor. But it is something which ultimately creates the shelter for the ships. So the initial investment is definitely going to be high. So private developers, when they start constructing a port, dredging and breakwater takes time. That's why government has come up with this new model where landlord develops the basic infrastructure, does the breakwater, then the reclamation island or the basic facility or area to construct the berths are developed. Now, to handle this deep ports, what is important is, of course, everybody looks at time. In 2000, rather 97 to 2000, L&T constructed a breakwater almost 5 kilometers in 5 years for a naval base in Karwar. But same length in 2012, it's not 5 kilometers. In around 3.7 kilometers, L&T constructed a breakwater for our own facility in Kattupalli in Tamil Nadu within 2 years. The entire concept commissioning of the facility, which includes a port, breakwater, shipyard, and a modular fabrication facility, was done in 3 years. So if there is a proper planning and continuous decision making, there is no doubt that we can do things in the shortest span of time. What is important is to plan things on paper and execute it. Now again, I'm coming back to the technology. Now the challenge what we are having when we are going for this deep draft ports is to construct a breakwater at a deeper depth. So conventionally India, we are using rubble mount breakwaters, which is a breakwater constructed by placing rock in a systemic way in a trapezoidal shape. So if I have to construct a breakwater at 25-meter water depth, the bottom width of the breakwater will be almost 200 meters, which means literally I need to convert a hill somewhere on mainland and break it into pieces and dump in the sea. This is going to be a killer both in terms of environmental aspect, because the disturbance to seabed is something which we should minimize, and at the same time the quarries or hillocks we are disturbing, which is again creating an environmental balance. So now L&T these days are working extensively on bringing vertical wall breakwaters, where the cross section will be like a vertical, which will predominantly consist of concrete. It will be cast, precast in a near shore. It will be floated like a ship. It will be taken to the breakwater location. It will be ballasted and brought down. So we generally call it as caisson breakwaters. It is extensively used in Europe and even in Middle East, where there is shortage of rock sourcing. So this is something which we are working, and we are also doing a project in Kudangulam, where we are casted almost 7 caissons, which is 45-meter long, 20-meter wide, and 15-meter depth. So that the weight of the caisson itself is 7,000 tons. This ultimately we need to take it and put it in. So we are working extensively on creating efficient deep water breakwaters. And there are a lot of technologies. We work together with the other arms of L&T, where we customize the construction equipment. We create our own jack-up platforms with our L&T shipbuilding. There are special barges created. So based on the size of the project, we invest and we create this basic equipment required for the projects, and we continue with that.
No, truly, I think L&T is actually looked upon as engineers for the world now. It's not engineering for India. Commendable work is being done. So I'll come back to Rajivji and maybe have some tricky questions. And you talked about whole connectivity part of it, right? From an era of minor ports to be called as non-major ports, and probably in India, probably is the one where the most efficient way of evacuation is actually not there. What I mean by that is the rail connectivity is not there as much to the non-major ports in as much as to the major ports. And the contribution of railways in the whole evacuation at one point in time, even at a port like JNPA, dropped down to something like 13%. That means 87% of the cargo, the container part of it, was evacuated through road, right? So all of these are some of the challenges, and things are not hunky dory even now, right? At best, the overall rail on the freight is 30%. That means 70% is still done through the road, and there is a lot of cost involved in the whole transportation of this, leave alone the environment impact there. So with how do you kind of look at these challenges which are there, and from a growth story perspective, So 2 major ports have got announced. That is one part of it. But there are other aspirations of people, port developers who are made significant investments and private money which has gone into all of that, right? And connectivity, the fulcrum of my question is on the connectivity part of it. How can that get enabled further, so that there is an efficient, cost effective, environment friendly aspect, which is there, and JNP is still to get a, let's say, a dedicated freight corridor connectivity. uh, that's where we are. Over to you, sir.
And so, listening to Tijo Thomas, L&T's experience, and these ports are all constructors' delight, but the investors don't like them, and that's why you need a government to build them. Because we are building a more complicated port in Salaya, which is 5 kilometers inside the sea. My cost is only $1 billion. I have no breakwater. I've built a trestle, and I'm protected by natural islands. And I choose the location in such a way that I don't have to do all this. Now, why shouldn't the government do it also? Or, private companies can do it. Because at the end of the day, you have to be very judicious because the customer is not going to pay for it. So who is going to pay for it? If a private company does that, then it goes into NCLT and the banks lose and everyone loses equity and debt. But in case government does it, of course, I think government will have funded through the exchequer. But coming back to your question of see, today the biggest problem is that it takes time to get rail. And there are a lot of issues. We in Salaya wanted to get rail, and it had a connectivity of 20-25 kilometers. And initially only we were trying, then we along with Adani and everyone was trying, but that has never seen the light of the day. So almost 100 million tons of cargo gets handled in over a period of time. It'll grow more in Hazira. It's a great location, but there is no rail connectivity. So then what do? You go by road. Road is something which is easiest to do, and trucks are available. It's all in the private sector, so it's easy to do that. So I think with the Gati Shakti thing, there are a lot of these last mile connectivities which are being looked at. In Salaya also, we are developing a 17 kilometers last line connectivity. But we are making the investment and we'll hand it over to the railways. That will help a lot in creating that connectivity. But it has a lot of challenges because it has to go through villages, evacuation, land, everything. So I hope that by March we should be ready with it. But it is something which is a must. As far as liquids are concerned, of course, we can develop pipelines. So for our liquid terminal, we had full connectivity, rail, road, pipelines, everything, and by sea route. So all four. And the cargo was almost 20-25% each way. So, and same is with Reliance there at Hazira, at Vadinar, at Jamnagar. So that is one location where the largest amount of crude and products get handled, but you would not see any congestion on the roads. So I think railway has to reach out and help, and that can become a big enabler. Because if you look at our dream of making the country a 20 trillion or 40 trillion or 30 trillion, and why not? Because if it's a simple mathematics, that if you have a population of 1.5 billion people and a 10,000 per capita income, it goes to 15, and then if it is 15, then it goes to higher numbers. So all these numbers can come only if we have other numbers to fill up, which is manufacturing, which is consumption, and all trading, transportation. Now, if you look at small countries like Singapore or the Middle Eastern hub, they are managing with their small economies in front of us, 1/10 of us or less. But we are a large country with large, widespread these ports. Why can't we do it? Same is with say Air India, but we cracked it in telecom. I was in telecom earlier, so we used to look at telecom numbers were so small for a country. From 10 million lines, we went to 1.2 billion lines. So similar, and investment also comes in when people see there's a return possibility, and it just becomes a sweet spot, and people start investing. Money is not a constraint. So similarly, I think it will happen in the transportation sector, where shipping, construction of ships, the shipyards, the ports, rail connectivity, all has to match up with each other to be able to realize this dream. But having said that, as far as the ports are concerned, I think we need rail connectivity more than anything else. Rest of the things are all.
No, absolutely. And if you actually see the tap-off point, at best would be like 30 to 40 kilometers. That's about it, right? I mean, you will have the
Rail is available
everywhere. It just beats me that for that 40 kilometer of connection, you're not able to get it done at all.
So there was this port, Diggi port.
and-
So first time I went to see the port, my boss, Mr. Ruya, sent me there. So I came back and I told him it's a very good site for for a hotel or some kind of a leisure, because it's beautiful. But there is no connectivity. Rail, road, both connectivities are not there. How will you evacuate? So, and that's what actually plagued that project.
it never came on the other side of the site.
It's been 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
Still, there is, now road is there, but there is no rail connectivity. And there are two sides to it. It's in both sides.
Yeah. On the other side, rail can't come. Maybe only on, yeah. The only is only on
No,
side.
we were looking at some new refinery sites,
Fair enough.
crude to chemicals, and I've been going around. We can't find a site in Maharashtra.
Yeah. So over to you, and in same part of it on the connectivity, and more so because on the containers, it's equally, if not more important, to have a very efficient supply chain. And you talked about it. How are you viewing the developments which are happening, and what more needs to be done to have a lot more efficient system? Can this be broken at all, or will, as far as India concerned, we just live and say, road would be the most preferred part of it? Just to give a data point, I think JNPA, to kind of bring down the congestion, they spent close to 5,000 crore on a road, which is probably what a port can get built. When you're saying $8 billion is what is the, that you're investing in Salaya for a full port, just from a connectivity you spent to bring down the congestion. And that congestion could have also got avoided if the rail connectivity had been brought in. But yeah, over to you.
So I guess hindsight is always the best friend, right? Or the biggest enemy. And I'm someone who looks at things probably with more opportunity, and I do see that. So if you look at JNPA, rail connectivity is there. What's not there is DFC. When JNPA was built, we didn't have the concept of DFC. So it actually evolved later. If you look at Vadhavan and the announcements coming up, you are thinking of DFC first. You're thinking of national highway connectivity first, and then you're thinking of the port coming in, right? So it's a matter of timing. The whole port ecosystem, and now we are calling it an ecosystem. Back in the days, it was not an ecosystem. It was like a flag being planted, then let's look at how do we build it backwards. When you're going that way, you create bottlenecks, and that's what we are with. The road infrastructure that JNPA has invested in, being an operator at JNPA, I mean, kudos to them for that, because I have visited JNPA 5-6 years back. Just going to the terminal was an absolute nightmare. And now I travel 60 kilometers through monsoons, and I'm there in the terminal in an hour. Right? So that makes a huge difference, and also with regards to the trailers and trucks, it makes a difference. Definitely in JNPA, as a container terminal operator there, we are hopeful that the DFC last mile will be done, and that basically will swing volume. But think of it another way. Where is the bottleneck? Where will be the bottleneck? Today, between Navasheva and Mundra, you handle 70 to 73% of India's containerized trade. One of the port, Mundra, is operating probably at around 90% utilization. JNPA is operating at around 85 to 90% utilization. Any world standard port which needs to be super efficient usually operates at around 70 to 75% utilization. That is one of the biggest challenge, right? The rest of the infrastructure then is there to cater to that. So announcements like Vadhavan is actually fantastic and a need in order to drive India in the direction of the ambition. I will speak about what we've been doing as APM Terminals Mumbai or Gateway Terminals India in terms of helping or doing our bit with this. As I said, a container terminal is almost like an airport. So we've got our wharf side, which is like the runways, where we have to ensure we can actually handle the bigger scale of aircrafts, or in our case, the vessels that keep on coming in. We've also been built. We are now finished 20 years this year in August, actually. GTI completed 20 years of our lease agreement with another decade to go. So you understand that the vessels that used to call us 20 years back are very different from the vessels that call us today. You've been hearing around in terms of the cost of investment in a port. What we've been speaking about is the brick and mortar, but one of the biggest investment is actually equipment. Buying a STS crane is around 11 to 15 million dollars, depending on where you're buying it, with what specifications you're buying, right? What we've done during the course of last year, causing a lot of pain to the trade because we actually shut down one of our berth for an upgrade project, we call it Fit for Future, is because we've upgraded our cranes. Our old cranes were only capable of handling 18 wide in terms of a vessel. The biggest vessel that Navasheva can handle, that JNPA can handle, requires 23 wide. We did not have that. A very efficient terminal, obviously built 20 years back, who've spent a lot of money on cranes because of the timing. Now the vessels have evolved. How can we keep up? So we've invested around $100 million last year in upgrading our cranes. We've got 6 new cranes which are able to handle 23-meter wide and thereby take care of the largest vessels that call Navasheva. At the same time, we have to strengthen the wharf, because when we built the wharf, we were not thinking of cranes this big either. So then you have to invest in that. That is the cycle that we have to go through, and all of it takes money. All of it also means that I like the call that was there in the previous panel where I said we are all in here for business to make profit. If you look at, again, linking to that, how the policies have been reforming, right? We, 20 years back, started with concession agreements or tariff regimes where we've been regulated, right? If you go into JNPA today, you have 5 different terminals operating with 5 different tariff models, which is probably the most unique thing you'll see in the world. If you see model concession agreement of 2021, we are actually considering now with the growth market as the best regulator, which is the case. But then old concessioners who've made the early investments in India have not transitioned. Now, when we want to drive investment, when we want to help and grow, an investment in technology, which is another very important thing, right? And that is expensive. If we want to transition a terminal to 5G, because we want to visualize things, drive digitization on our assets, these cost money. We also need the support of the regulation upgrade, if I would say, or bringing the others also to what we've realized is the current norms to support that. So I see hope. I see positive discussions. I see positive movement. Also, the way ports like Vadhavan are being planned actually makes us think that we've realized how to do the connectivity first, and that is the most important thing to reduce the supply chain cost.
I really like the example of you saying planting the flag first and then figuring out that's what was done before, to now saying that let's look at it holistically. I get that, and probably that was lacking before, and hence when the port has really come up, we're not able to get the right of way for the rail network to actually come in through. Yeah, all fantastic points, and you also kind of touched upon some of the next question I was about to ask you on the PPP side. And of course, any port conference can't go without talking about a model concession agreement, how we have not revisited that. Probably, I don't know how many times you would have talked about this, saying that all have to come onto the same page. Anyways, so on coming in from a construction perspective, right? The whole, and Rajiv, you also talked about the green. How much of that is kind of taking center stage today from a sustainability perspective, and how is that getting implemented probably in a greenfield port vis-a-vis a brownfield port? If you can throw some light on that.
See, it's ultimately it's all linked to sustainable development. That's what I was telling. When you look at as a contractor, what is important is to optimize the use of natural resources. And that is something which can help reduce the carbon emission. And of course, reduce the use of fossil fuels. Even in a lot of our construction projects, earlier we used to depend on diesel generators for power generation. Now, these days, what we are doing is of course, based on the length of the project, duration of the project, we install solar panels and we sometimes even put some wind turbines. And another thing is we depend on the state electricity board to directly take the construction power from, even though it's costly, but it generally reduces the carbon footprint rather than using the fossil fuel. So these are some initiatives we have taken on the construction project also. And I had one point which I wanted to touch upon, the hinterland connectivity, even though it's generally developers are more bothered about it, but I have some design background and I worked on port planning earlier. One thing what India needs to look at is to, when we are conceptualizing new ports, it should be planned in such a way that, of course, rail and road network is important, which now we are taking care of in Vadhavan port. Another thing is to have proximity to inland waterways. If you look at a lot of countries, major ports are developed on the sides of major rivers. So if you look at Bangladesh is an example, a lot of ports are constructed along the rivers. So if there is an option, if you don't have direct road connectivity or rail connectivity nearby, we can plan a port somewhere inside a river, which is a bigger river. Of course, it needs some dredging and it needs river training to be done. Then take it to a location where you can get road connectivity and rail connectivity and plan it. And also you can get bigger vessels and shift it to smaller vessels and use inland waterways for this hinterland connectivity. That is something which we need to focus on. Already government has started taking initiatives, but this is something which we need to really dwell upon.
Thank you. One aspect was on the PPP part of it, and I'm not sure how many in this room would know. The port sector PPP is one of the probably the successful aspect which is there, which has happened. Much of it is talked about on the road side, but roads have been more on the hybrid annuity model part of it, which is called as a PPP, but it's actually a deferred EPC. But on the ports, it's a pure, either the private sector has taken on the concession and really built it, or from a, as Rajiv says, it's not asset monetization, but value creation, that people have done it. And in the recent past, if you were to see from a terminal bidding part of it also, whatever has been the authorities or general publics thinking that this is what it will go at price at, but it has thumped it and gone significantly higher. Multiple of them, not one, multiple of them have gone. So how can we ride on this, success which has happened in this particular sector and not really talked about much? And even in the PPP BOT part of it, and we have, the Tuna Tekra now, which is a greenfield port, has been awarded and construction has started to happen. That's not the case in, let's say, in any other infra sector. Even in the roads, it's, I would say, a very tepid response is there on the BOT side of looking at it. So, Rajiv, how do you look at the whole private sector participation, both on the terminals and also if even on the greenfield part of it? Is there good interest both in India, outside of India, partnerships, and how they are looking at the overall development and the linkages to the growth of the economy, and hence you need to have new ports coming in. And you also talked about how you are efficient in capital allocation and in getting it done. Over to you.
Yeah, so, basically people all understand that India is growing decently and, given the population and given the other factors which are there in terms of quality of manpower, resources, etc., and governance, we are poised to grow almost mathematically, though it's not so simple, to 5 trillion, then 7 or 10 or 20, whatever. So if you go, if you have a long-term view, say about 20 trillion, that is 5 times of today's economy. So that will need a huge amount of investment in infrastructure. And, we have seen decent participation, as you said. There are various factors. if you look at the container frenzy, because basically these are all taken by the captives. I call them captives because they are all, basically ensuring that the lines have, a foothold on the waterfront. Basically, that is why they are bidding what they're bidding, because it's the value chain of a company, which in which port is a small part, and it starts from shipping to ports to logistics, etc. So I think that is a good thing, nothing wrong. Only that when we are talking about Make in India, unfortunately, we do not have many challenges on the shipping side for these lines. And I think it's high time that India, with a large amount of cargoes, should position some credible, shipping companies which can come into the container space. And I think it will happen, in my view. So that is one part. The other is, as far as the greenfield ports are concerned, we have seen various models. There are private companies which have done it, like us or Adani or JSW, and many others who were taken over by various companies, maybe one. So then, there are initiatives by state governments. Like Andhra has done a very good thing. There were 3-4 ports which they wanted to develop for the longest of time, and finally they said, okay, we will do it in the, and they did it themselves. It's more like the road model, where they gave contracts to construct those ports, and over a period of time, the terminals can be let out. And the third is, of course, the government of India, where they, through the major ports, are increasing the port capacity, going to greener locations, etc., and newer locations. So these are the three. But when you look at competition within the port sector, if I am a port operator, I have to compete with, like he's mentioned, they have different PPP operator. PPP operation is a simpler thing, because your money, there are hardly many risks that you take, except the contract that you sign with the government. So that's the biggest risk. But other than that, there are not many risks that you take, because infrastructure is given. Sometimes they don't adhere to that, I will give you this much of water depth, etc., or connectivity. Those can take time, but by and large, you're not taking the risk of that much of investment. But here I compete with government, which has unlimited land resource without paying for it. They have exchequer funding them, and they get the sovereign rating, so they get interest at a much lower rate. So as against that, when I or anyone else, JSW or Adani or anyone else does a port project, these are all not given. So and then if you have terminals in government ports vis-a-vis through a PPP project to a terminal being operated at any of the private ports, same things are there. So considerations could be different because the investments are different. So I somehow feel that the government should create a holding company where all the major ports should get eventually listed, so that they can appreciate, they can be completely transparent, and they can appreciate the pains that we go through. And because in every sector, unless you understand the nuances of the sector, if you have to grow very big from say 3,000-4,000 million tons to 10,000 to 15,000, then you have to create that kind of level playing field for the players. But having said that, we are finding investments to come in because India is attractive.
Sure, great. We are down to the minute. I'll just ask the organizer, is it for questions which are done? Yeah, okay. Mr. Bose, yeah.
You're loud enough, you can stand.
In paucity of time, we just request you to keep it concise.
Tata Consulting Engineers. I do appreciate what Tijo said. The breakwater which we have proposed for Wadhwan is about 10 kilometer, right? Which Royal Ascending has done. And if you go at 40 meter depth, so minus 15 to plus 5. So 20 meter into 3 if I take, it's a 60-story building you are building inside the sea with rock. So when I made the calculation and showed to JNPT also, it requires roads, 3 roads, and the distance between the truck is 160 meter. So can you imagine this? So that means from execution angle, the design was not made. Point number 1. Point number 2 is, Rajiv, what you're thinking that we should still stay in that creek concept of making port. That's not the age now. We have to go for deep water ports. And we need, today...
We are
Wadhwan
talking
is-
about deep water ports only.
Yeah.
Who's talking about shallow ports? No one
No,
builds.
we are talking about real deep water, 25 million tube ports here in Wadhwan. 25 million is about 20 to 30% more of what presently India handles, right? So that scale when we are thinking, so we are thinking of bullet train, we are thinking of say Ram Mandir, or we are thinking of Parliament. So this is an iconic project, first of all. When these kind of projects are planned, there is need for a much greater stakeholder discussions, like the construction company, other consultants, before it is tabled and set out. Even when you are going for PPP dredging project for this kind of scale, give me one example where the dredging and reclamation in the world has been done on PPP mode.
Okay,
This question is
all right.
Jagan, if you have an example where
Okay,
in
okay,
PPP
sir,
mode,
we've understood,
No, it is a
Please,
good
sir.
model, provided there is visibility, in the sense that there won't be other factors which will delay the project. And, the person who is investing as a PPP operator. And in the meanwhile, maybe government can
the
keep paying
mistake
the
what
bill.
we are doing is, it is not a road project where everything is well defined.